Hello, I am your host Chloe Brewster and welcome to The Creative Comeback, a love affair with the arts in podcast form. I talk to creators from all different walks of life, discussing the ups and downs of being a creative in modern society, delving into the nitty-gritty of the arts industries. Today on The Creative Comeback, I chatted to Matilda Murphy, a musical theatre student in London. We spoke about encouragement from friends and family, as well as the impact COVID has had on her time at drama school. So my first question for you is, what made you choose acting and singing as a career?
So I feel like probably as most young girls, my parents put me in dance class and singing class when I was really little. And then it just became something that I was really took very naturally to, and cared a lot about. And I was really fortunate that there were loads of opportunities that seemed to come up as I grew up that I was able to participate in. And then when I was at college, I thought, you know what, let's do this for real. Let's really give this a go. So I auditioned for drama schools and now I'm working to pursue it as a career.
So you definitely had a push from the people around you when you were younger and then sort of developed a love for it over time.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. My parents are, my dad is not at all into theatre, but my mum is. But they've both been so supportive and encouraging, and that's been really positive.
Yeah, because that was actually one of my sort of questions on my list was, do you feel like you're supported by the people around you?
Yeah, so much. I mean, it took the auditioning process to get into drama schools and just being an actor in general is really full on. There's a lot of rejection. It takes a long time. And so I definitely thought after a couple of years, my parents were maybe going to try and steer me in a different direction. But they've been so supportive and have been completely understanding about how long it takes and that doesn't detract from my love for it or my passion. And they've been really great.
Perfect. Do you feel like, because we were sort of talking about this with someone the other day, obviously to get into dance schools and acting schools and things like that, the funds, the cost of it is so much more than going to a normal uni and things like that. Do you feel like there's significant support there from the government for you, or do you just feel like it's oh, you're doing that, we don't care?
I mean, I'm really fortunate that my school is a conservatoire, so I can get the funding that I need. But I definitely have friends who go to private institutions who can really struggle to make ends meet because there isn't a cap on, or the cap is much higher on private universities. So the price that they pay for their university and their training is I mean, astounding.
I know. I think everyone's a little bit naive because I remember the first time someone said to me, oh yeah, you actually have to pay. It's not, you don't just get given the funding like you do with university. I remember being, God, so you've got to make that decision very early on, I suppose, that's where you want to go because you've got to start saving for it.
Yeah. So with the private universities, which is what a lot of drama schools are, there's the covering, the amount that the government will cover for you is only about half of your fees every year, and the rest just has to come from you. And there's very little in the way of kind of support.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can imagine that alone is a massive factor why people just choose to leave it as a hobby rather than pursue it into a career.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an issue that our industry, on a whole, is people have been talking about its inaccessibility for so long. And I think hopefully we're moving in a more positive direction of inclusion and acceptance of people from all backgrounds and making it less of an elitist sport almost.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it'd be nice to see people from different places around the country who normally wouldn't be able to go. Because I think, like you said, at the moment, it's sort of has been known to be one of those industries where it's only people who can afford to go are here, or you have to work so hard to the point that you sort of lose out on the education because you're working to pay for it. And it's one of those situations. And then you get into the industry and it's you're fighting off other people as well. You never never have
Yeah,
that.
I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, um, about different musicals, and we were saying, considering how elite it seems to be, it's kind of for the middle class and the upper class who are able to realistically pursue careers in especially like acting and musical theatre. But we were saying, if you look at the shows that are currently, well, not currently, but currently on in the West End, it's all shows about sort of underdogs, about the working class, about revolutions, about like rising up. And so it's such a shame that even though the musicals seem to champion that, the actors and the directors and the kind of creative team don't necessarily reflect that all of the time.
Yeah, it's sort of like profiting off of the idea of it, but they're not giving those people the opportunity to actually be authentic with a part. It's just getting someone to
Yeah,
take it, sort of.
yeah, completely.
So, what does it mean to you when you're up on the stage and you're doing what you do? Like, what does that mean to you?
It's just such an unreal feeling, and I don't think it's one I could compare to anything else. I I've always been fascinated with the idea of being able to make people cry or laugh or be angry or root for you, or cringe, like all based on people who don't exist, like stories that are not real and that everybody knows aren't real because we're all sat in a theatre or watching a film, and yet we can't help but have those reactions. That is something that has always really intrigued me, and that's what I love. I love doing musical theatre, but I definitely approach it from an acting perspective because I'm so fascinated by that relationship between the audience and you as an actor.
Definitely. So, it's sort of like an escape as well at the same time, because you're getting to like sort of put your emotions into something else rather than it always being on you and your life all the time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of common thought amongst actors of, actually, whilst a lot of people seem quite extroverted as actors, most of us are very introverted or very insecure, and so we like to project that through other characters, through acting. So I think there's always that like little joke amongst actors being like, actually, we probably just like to pretend to be other people.
As a sort of industry and community, do you feel like it's like every man for themselves, or do you feel like it's easy to create relationships with people, or do you think it's like very much like I'm doing this for me, no one else is important?
There's definitely both aspects in sort of equal strength, because when you are auditioning, it very much is every man for themselves, but yet at the same time there's sort of this unity in the fact that we're all fighting together. So even though we're not fighting as a team, we all have to go through the same like process of rejection and audition, and so I think there is a real, and I think there's a really great support. We love to share videos of our friends doing amazing things, or performers hitting incredible notes, or doing however many pirouettes in a row. So I think there is a championing of one another, but there will always come a certain point where we do have to become a little bit more selfish, just through the nature of the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the fashion industry is very similar. You get to a point and you're like, oh, you are my friend, but also at the same time you're like my competition now, and I've got to like, and it's finding that sort of line between, okay, we're keeping our friendships separate to like what we're doing.
And also to like be able to say you're really talented and what you create is great, but I also have to, and I want to support that and uplift that, but I also have to try and make a career in something incredibly competitive.
Yeah, it's sort of like, yes, you're great, but also I'm great too. So I need to put myself first and sort of recognize that. But it must be so difficult, especially like with people who are your friends, to be like, oh, I'm going
Yeah,
to you and I'm going to get it type thing.
I'm really fortunate. I think that right now I'm training at the moment, we've all stopped competing a little bit, which is nice, because obviously through auditions everyone's competing to get on the course or competing for a role, but now we're all here. We kind of have a sense of like, okay, we're a little bit safe now, we've got a few years to be safe and just enjoy the ride. And actually that creates a really uplifting environment, because we're now able to just support each other for the first time without sort of slightly hoping at the back of your mind that you might be better than they are. You
Yeah,
can just kind of support one another for the time being before we go out into the world and have to like be competitive all over again.
yeah, you're sort of like wrapped in bubble wrap at the moment before you get
Sure.
back out into the.
Yeah.
So do you think that in the sort of creative industries, they're unskilled, or do you think that it's this narrative that likes to be built up that doing creative things is easy?
There is definitely a narrative that doing creative, like pursuing creative paths is easy, or is for the people who weren't academic or weren't, you know, sporty or whatever, and this was what they kind of chose to pursue because they almost couldn't do anything else. And I think that's such a misconception. I mean, especially I know from amongst my friends, like even in my class, I have a classmate who pursued medical school and then decided it wasn't for him, and is now training in musical theatre. And you can't for a second tell me that he is less academic or less smart than any other person. And we work, and I think you'll probably agree for your industry, we work so hard at what we do. And I think perhaps we can take a little bit of solace in the reason that people think it's easy is because we work hard, but we make it look easy. So I always try and take kind of some sort of peace in that the reason that you think it's easy is because I make it look easy when it isn't.
Yeah, definitely. I know what you mean. And it's like one of those things I think people don't realise that it never stops. You'll come home
Sure.
on TV and it'll be like, oh, that's an idea for something that I could use. And it's like you can never switch off the creative side of your brain, and it never like lets you have a break. And I think people think, oh, they go take some nice pictures, or they go and they sing on stage and then they go home. That's it. They get paid.
Yeah, and perhaps the difference is, I think as well, people are able, like you say, to go to a 9 to 5 job or work a long day, but then go home and it's completely separate. But I am my business. I am my career, and so I constantly like I can't take a break on the weekends and be lazy, because if I don't work, my singing takes a hit or my dance takes a hit. So it's kind of all encompassing, and it doesn't stop, because if I stop, I am my career, and therefore they kind of are symbiotic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like one of those things, like you've always got to be looking your best and being your best, because you are a walking advertisement for yourself. So
Yeah.
you might walk past someone in the street and then a month later you're auditioning or you're interviewing for a job with them and you're like, oh God, I hope they don't remember me when I was like at my worst a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
And it's like there's this massive side of it as well, like you've got to market yourself on social media and things now like that, like you haven't just got somebody to do it for you. So I feel like you're saying, like it just doesn't ever end. Like you are you've got to build the business that is you, so it doesn't stop.
And I think within our industries, within creative industries, there is a huge link between who you are as a person and then who you are as a creative. A lot of people like follow actors and musicians and fashion designers on Instagram, not just because they're interested in their creative work, but because they're also interested in their life and them as a person. And so you can never switch off, because you are your brand, therefore you're constantly representing yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things as well is like in this sort of industry, it's like most people tend to enjoy the job that they do and they like look forward to doing it because it's what you dream of doing. And I think that maybe there's like this negativity towards it because it's because we have fun. And I think
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to pursue careers that really engaged us.
yeah, and I feel like the people that aren't like don't like their job or aren't happy are the ones that sort of have a negative view of people who like just have fun with it and just love it all the time.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's also the misconception that we have fun all of the time and therefore we never work hard. There are definitely times when, even though I love what I do, I don't want to be there. I don't want to take a ballet class at 8 a.m. Like, that sucks. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to be in a rehearsal for 12 hours and like not get really any break. And so I think people just think you just bounce around the studio all day, or you're just there putting outfits together and taking pictures all day, and that's lovely, and that there isn't any hard work involved, and actually there is much more than people imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember in the summer I did a photo shoot, and I left home at like 9:30 in the morning. The model then got on the wrong train and had to wait an hour for the train to turn up. Then it was a half an hour drive to where we were going. We get there and it was the hottest day of the year. We're at the beach trying to take these photos. It's packed. It was busy. Like you just had people everywhere. And we're sat in the burning sun and you don't even realise how hot it is until like you get home and you're like, oh my God. And I think by the time I got home, it must have been like 7:30. And I remember I looked in the mirror and my back was just sunburnt, and people just don't realise like you don't ever get this opportunity to just like put sun cream on or whatever. You're just constantly busy.
Yeah, there's and I think creative artists often as well have such a sense of determination, maybe because of how tough the industries are, that actually time is money and time is lost work, and all of that kind of feeds into the fact that you don't take breaks, you don't put on sun cream or get hydrated when you need to, which I think is why sometimes we get burnout or injuries like before when they weren't necessarily inevitable, they were definitely avoidable, but we just don't take those chances.
Definitely. And I just don't think that we're taught how to manage our time so that we don't lose money, but we have the time to be healthy and things like that as well. I think that's
it's nice that we're moving towards something that is a bit more mindful. We've certainly had more lessons and reminders of rest and recovery and taking time if you're injured, whereas maybe 10 years ago the work ethic was to push through or to not take a break.
Yeah, and I think this sort of period at home has sort of taught people that actually you don't need to be there all the time. Like some things can just be done through an email or through a Zoom call. You don't need to like travel, or you don't need to be that all day. Like things can actually now be done from home and give you that time to go, actually I can rest for a day and just work from home.
Yeah, so hopefully we are moving towards industries and careers where there is more of an emphasis on taking care of yourself. I mean, it's the irony that we are our own business and we are our own brand, but yet we don't take care of ourselves the way we should.
I know, it just seems so crazy, but like I said, there's no time for it. You just end up like, there aren't enough hours in the day, I feel.
Yeah, it's such a balancing act.
So sort of in mind with that, how do you feel that COVID has impacted creative industries? Negatively, positively, a bit of both?
I mean, generally it feels so negative, right? Places that I'm in London, and like just these theatres, these like beautiful buildings that were so inspiring to me that have been just empty, gathering dust almost. It feels awful looking at the job losses and the financial impact, but just the lack of creative outlet. And like you say, we love what we do, and so when we can't do that, that really can be quite hurtful and quite disappointing and discouraging. Whereas actually for other people, a year of not going into the office might have actually been a blessing. I think we as an industry haven't felt the same relief that like businesses closing or like shutting their buildings has maybe had on other places. But at the same time, we've been really fortunate that we've through that had other opportunities that we wouldn't have normally been able to have. So we've had workshops with people who otherwise wouldn't be able to come in and teach us because they'd be working full-time jobs in the industry. I was really fortunate to attend a workshop with the associate musical director of Hamilton, who on any other day would never have been able to spare that time to work through with us, and we'd have never got to work with him, and he was so inspiring because he'd been working full time. So I think we have to try and find those moments of positivity to not get caught up in the overwhelming negativity of everything.
Definitely. I feel like it's sort of given like a little bit of a reset at first I found it difficult, and I was like, I just can't be creative when I'm at home. Then I sort of thought, hang on a minute, like this is the prime opportunity to think outside the box and to do things that you would never think of doing, because you're in such a different like sort of workspace, that actually sometimes some of the best ideas that I've had have come from can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what's just happened. I've got a little something's just there you go. Something popped up and closed. I was like, ah.
Right.
It's like some of the best things that I've created have actually come from not being able to do anything and having to think outside the box and like create something from home. And I think it's like one of those things, and it's like you have just got to pick yourself up and say, okay, I can't do it this way, so how can I do it a different way that's going to be just as effective, or it's going to be better than that. And I think, like you said, and it is getting that time to speak to people who you would never be able to speak to before, and it's like experience, like you can turn around and say, oh, I've done this workshop with this person, and it's like, oh my god, that's crazy, and you've never ever been able to say that before.
Yeah, and we have created new ways of theatre. You've seen like there's new interactive kind of, because we've been able to get the camera up close to cast members, and so you've been able to see a show in a whole new light. I think it's the Royal Shakespeare Company have done a sort of interactive Midsummer Night's Dream, and Romeo and Juliet. There was a kind of sort of really interesting kind of combination of theatre and film using green screen and CGI, which was just really creative and something we never would have attempted before because we had no reason to. But we've now got something really interesting, and I think it will change. Specifically in my industry, I know we've all now been trained in self-tapes much more than we would have been previously, because actually, like you say, people are realizing we don't have to do all of this in a building. We can do first round self-tapes, we can do interviews, we can do some rehearsals in an online form, and actually that saves us money, that saves us time. Like, actually, I think as much as we're all so keen to go back to normal, and we will definitely try and do that, there will be elements of this kind of COVID world that will remain, I think, for a long time.
Definitely. And I think even once those sort of restrictions are gone, just looking at, like you said, like the sort of online versions of it, you're then adding that like accessibility for people who couldn't necessarily afford a ticket to go and see it in real life. And it's like they're then included as well. They've still got that opportunity, and like you said, like I think it's just going to open doors to expand it even more. And then obviously once it comes back, you're going to have sort of everything. You're going to have people dying to come and watch shows, and then you're also going to have those people that can't afford to but still want to see it.
Yeah, which kind of goes back to when we were talking about accessibility at the beginning. Like, actually, I think this has been really productive in some ways, because it's allowed us to realize how accessible we can make theatre, and it not detract. I think people were so worried before about saying, well, if we make it cheap to watch online, no one will come in person. And everyone's been screaming like, we're dying to come and see it in person, but also some of us can't travel that far. Some of us are abroad or international, or don't like feel safe to come to the theatre because we're living in a scary world. So actually, hopefully we will move towards making it more accessible to everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sort of the fashion industry has had a very similar approach to it. If you look, a lot of the fashion shows are pre-recorded now, or they like I think it was Moschino, they did a catwalk and they didn't even have models. They were all like puppet dolls. And
Wow.
it's just, I think in a way it's sort of given that breath of fresh air that was needed, because it was getting to a point where big fashion houses were like, well, we don't want to follow this whole like, oh, we have to have fashion week here, here and here at this time of the year and this time of the year. We want to choose when we do it. And I think it's sort of like really helping to sort of open up a new door and like it's almost press reset on everything, and like how can we change up with the times? Do you know what I mean? Maybe in industries that were a little bit behind the times on certain things.
Yeah, it's just made us realize maybe a couple of old habits that our industries have been stuck in, and therefore we have been stuck in. And actually, like you say, we've kind of had a new lease of life to be able to say, we don't have to just do it like that anymore. We can try something different, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't work, and we can learn from that.
Yeah, it's definitely given like the time to try different things.
Yeah.
So that being said, do you feel like there's this constant pressure to be creative even when you're like just burnt out and you just don't have the sort of brain power to do it? Do you feel like someone's always just like, no, you got to do this, you got to do that?
I mean, certainly, yeah, definitely. It was crazy to see at the beginning of the pandemic, specifically, the amount of people saying, I'm going to write a musical, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create this, I'm writing a play. And actually, I think just because creatives in them just don't really have a stop button, they don't know how to take their foot off the accelerator. Um, and everyone, like you say, is always asking for more hours in the day. And now we had all of those hours, it felt like there was such a pressure to use every single one of them, and sort of overlook the crazy situation that we were and still are in. And actually to say, oh, it doesn't matter about the whatever the stress might be of the pandemic, because you've got all of these hours now and you have to use them. And actually it was probably better to take a breath sometimes.
Definitely. I think it got to a point where everyone was just overthinking it and being like, I've not used 2 hours today that I could have used. I sat and had lunch, or I sat and watched TV, and it's like sometimes just having those 2 hours to yourself to not do anything is the greatest thing you could have done for yourself in that day, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm such a big advocate that rest is as productive as sitting down and writing something or creating something or being up on your feet dancing or singing or whatever it might be, for like whichever industry you are in. That actually, if you're not in the right headspace, you're not in the right mental or physical state to do that, you're actually going to be counterproductive to be doing things, and actually your rest is going to be the most productive thing you can do with your day.
Definitely. I think I've had many a moment where I worked and worked and worked, and then I've just gone, this is the worst sort of version of the work that I could have done. And if I'd just taken that time to watch TV or go to sleep, then it would have been so much better. But it's like, no, I'm going to get it done by this time. Like, you just.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree.
Sort of switching subjects a little bit now. And it's kind of a broad question, but like, what do you think the world would be like without creative industries?
I mean, it's, you see all the time on, well, I mean, I do just because of who I am and being an actor. People say that, if creative industries aren't necessary, go a day without Netflix, without the TV, without films, without books, without music, podcasts, without fashion. I mean, cool, don't wear clothes for a day and then see how you feel. It I think people don't quite realize how much creative industries impact every second of your day, whether you're a dancer or a ballerina, or whether you're an accountant, or whether you're a fast food worker. Actually, creativity is within every industry and within every facet of your life in so many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like, somebody's designed the suit that you're wearing, or someone's designed the logo for the brand that you work for. And it's like, there is always going to be somewhere creating an advert, or like, do you know what I mean? Like decorating the office. Like, somebody has just made those decisions to do it. Like, someone looked at a building or looked at a building site and said, I want the building to look like that. Like, you've always got someone along the line saying, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And it's like the foundation of everything in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, people designed the website that you run your business from, or the format of the web page that you use to do your work, and the music that plays on your car radio, the car that was designed. People don't realize, I think, quite how prevalent creative work is in this world, because they think it's a film or a dance, and
Yeah,
it's so much more than that.
definitely. And I think it's hard to imagine what it would be like without it, because it is so, you're so submerged in it all the time that it is just like, how can I get away from it? Like, even when I go to like obviously I work in a supermarket part-time to support me while I'm doing my studies and stuff. So even when I like take myself out of like a creative industry and do something just sort of pretty average, you can't even get away from it. Like you look around, you're like, oh, someone's designed that crisp packet, someone's designed this that I'm using, someone's designed what the shop's going to look like, what the logo looks like, what the uniform looks like. You just never ever ever can get away from it, no matter how hard you try.
Which is maybe why people almost take it for granted and say like, oh well, we don't, creative industries are not essential, they're not necessary. Just, I mean, there was a big thing obviously last year about people in the creative artists and industries retraining, and I think people just almost take it for granted because they're not aware of quite how ingrained in our culture and our society creative artistry is.
Definitely. And sort of touching on that sort of bit about the retrain campaign, how did that make you feel when you saw that?
I mean, being at a drama school with other people who are so passionate and so gifted and talented and hardworking, we all found it, I think, the biggest kick in the teeth. And I think the only thing we could do, which is what I seemed to see happen online, was we almost had to turn it into a joke. We had to take it as a joke, because I think if we didn't, just the way we'd have felt treated and would have been too much. And I think if we'd have taken it seriously, then actually that would have been really damaging. And on the whole, I think we just had to turn it into something funny or lighthearted, because there was no other way to deal with it, because actually it felt really hurtful from people who just have no idea what they're talking about.
Definitely. Every person that I've asked that question to has had the same response. You had to make it a joke because it's easier to show them that they're like, what they're saying is stupid. Like when you've got all the memes coming out like, oh, we need to retrain, but someone took the photo, someone edited it, and it's like, you have to actually make a joke and be like, the funny thing is, without us, you wouldn't have had it in the first place. And that's pretty much what everybody said, is like, oh, you just got to take it as a joke, because otherwise you sort of get offended by it and it's just like demotivating.
Yeah, especially as people who are training right now, and knowing my friends who have trained for many years who are now out of work because of COVID, that actually it just felt like the biggest insult. Because also I think in our industries we do start working quite hard much younger than other people. Ballerinas start training from seriously from the age of sort of 8 or 9 these days. The same with people who are incredible vocalists or actors. They tend to start really young. And so it kind of, to say that all of that work would be completely negated and we should just go and do something else, it was almost unbelievable.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, it's just people don't realise that you start at such a young age, and sometimes people can go on for such a long career as well, and it's like you end up working sometimes like 20 years longer than people who like have just decided that they want to woke up one day and were like, I want to do this. Like there's so much dedication to it that isn't shown. And I think that campaign specifically was sort of a massive naive, almost like brainwash to just be like, yeah, they're not important, they don't do anything, you can just retrain.
It felt so misinformed, and such an attack on people who like, we didn't do anything, we didn't provoke in any way, we just said we'd like some support from the government in the same way that other industries are getting support. And then it felt like just the biggest kick in the teeth in response.
And I feel as well, it's like you said, with you just wanted some support and stuff like that, I feel like it's like, oh no, we're not going to give you support, but we're also going to rely on you to be the ones that get us through lockdown and keep us all entertained, but we're not going to give you like any money towards your venues that are closing. We don't care if you lose your jobs, like that's fine. Like it's just, and I think the same with like obviously all of the sort of grants and loans and stuff that they had in place during this period. I was speaking about it with someone else, and we were sort of saying a lot of them weren't even reachable anyway. You would apply and you'd meet everything, but the postcode wouldn't be the correct postcode, or you'd apply and they'd be like, you've not been self-employed long enough. And it's that support, there was no support at all from like the ground upwards. It was sort of like, unless you've been doing this for a long time, you just didn't have that support.
Yeah, it felt, I think it felt to me and people I know, like they didn't want to help. They were trying to put obstacles in our way to purposefully trip us up, to purposefully be able to exclude people in our industry from grants or from support. And like you say, when they're going to rely on entertainment in such a big way as we have in lockdown, to then have this kind of personal attack on people in our industry, it was just shocking. It was just, you almost have to laugh, because if not, it's just so tragic.
Definitely. And I think it's just sort of now, when we're sort of trying to come to the other side of it, it's like all of a sudden festivals are selling out and stuff like that. And I think that they'll find that a majority of the money that they make back will be from this sort of industry. And I just think we have had probably the least amount of like support out of everybody, but they're then going to rely on this community and this industry to be the ones that get people to engage again and like bring people back out again. And I'm like, hang on a minute, like this was something you should have nurtured, because they're going to expect that the first day you can go to the theatre, they're going to expect you to have a musical ready to go that's perfect.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. And I don't think people realise, like, hang on a minute, if you'd supported us, then maybe we would have one ready to go for you when we open our doors, but it's even longer now getting back into it.
Yeah, and maybe you found the same, but I know I found it so frustrating. And this is not a criticism of sports, but like how professional sports has been able to go back in such a big way, and yet other industries, which I would say our industries kind of follow a similar kind of pattern or form to professional sports, like, you know, professional football. It was really frustrating to see all the allowances that were made for sport that then seemed to be completely inapplicable for some unknown reason to any other sector.
Definitely, and I completely know what you're saying. It's just crazy to me that you can have people go and play football, but you can't have like a group of actors put on a performance that gets streamed around the world. Like,
Yeah.
why was like you said, why was the allowances not made the same? Because they could have quite easily been done.
Yeah.
So, sort of taking a bit of a lighter note, how do you develop your career? Like, what sort of opportunities do you look for, and how do you look for them?
So, I mean, at the moment, I am just I've sort of taken a back seat in looking for opportunities in order to focus on my training, because for me, I feel like that's the current way that I'm developing my career. But I do know and have many classmates who train alongside looking for potential work. But obviously, I mean, either way, it's sort of less prevalent now because there isn't any work. But I think it's so hard because there isn't a direct route as there would be for, like, it's really hard to become a lawyer, right? But if you want to be a lawyer, there's sort of a very set row of things you need to do in terms of qualifications or training. Or to be a doctor, you have to work incredibly hard and be incredibly smart, but there is a very set route on how you would become a consultant or a surgeon or whatever. Whereas I think our industries have such a huge range of opportunities. Everybody has a different story about how they got their start, about how they got their foot in the door, which is great because it means that you're not limited to, like, if drama school doesn't work out, then you can't be an actor or something like that. But at the same time, it's almost so daunting because there are so many opportunities you sort of don't know how to start.
Definitely. And I think, like you said, there's just not one straightforward path that everyone goes down. It's like so many different avenues that people are coming from and really don't know when it could start and how it can develop, I suppose.
Yeah, so it was in the end of February, just before lockdown, which is now crazy to think, the year that we've had, was I was sort of doubting myself about whether I wanted to train or whether I wanted to pursue a career without training, or without pursuing my degree first. And in February, I performed in my first profit shared piece. So it was the first piece that I had potential to like make money with. And I was like, this is going to be the beginning of me being an actor. And I had auditioned for schools and was waiting for results from schools as a backup. But that was going to be my aim, was maybe to use that opportunity to move me forward. So I then wouldn't train. And I mean, I'm really fortunate that I then chose to train, and then lockdown hit, because I think people starting out right now, I have friends who just graduated like in the last year, and it makes me terrified to think kind of this has gone on so much longer than any of us has expected.
Yeah, definitely. It's like everyone sort of thought it would only be a couple of months, and then we're here like a year and a bit down the line, and it's just like, oh God, like where do you go from here? What do you do? No one knows.
Yeah. And I think before I was looking at an industry that I think was, for better or for worse, I think both, was quite a predictable industry. Predictable in its unpredictability, but there were sort of elements of the industry which you knew what you were heading into. Whereas now the game has changed a bit, because like you said, we've pressed reset, and now it's a bit more daunting because we sort of don't know what's going to be out there when we're finished. We don't know when things like start opening up again, what kind of world we're going to be in.
Definitely. It's like, will there be roles? Will everyone be able to get involved, or will it be like back to sort of having the same people do the same things?
Yeah, and just knowing about the financial implications of this year, will we have the same shows? Will they run for as long? Can they afford to do that? It will be kind of daunting but exciting to see.
Definitely. So what are your goals for the next 5 years?
Well, I want to finish my degree. That's the first one. And then from there, I've never been a person to have specific dream roles. For me, it's not like being Les Mis or bust. I've always tried to be much more broad with my ambition, because I think, playing Elphaba in Wicked would be amazing, but I don't think it's the be all and end all. I mean, on a broad spectrum, I would just like to see our industry recover and thrive. And for me, if I can be a part of that in any small way, I've always said, if I can be in a theatre, I'll be happy. If that's being a leading lady, amazing. Do you know what? If that's sweeping the floors and selling tickets, I'll be happy with that too.
Definitely. And do you feel like you're supported by like your friends and your family to sort of continue with that path and just reach whatever destination you sort of come to?
Yeah, so much so, so much so. I mean, it's so nice to sit and talk with our friends about how we're all gonna be in the show together and we're all gonna like change the world. Realistically, I mean, will that happen? Probably not. And that sounds awful, but it's the realities of an industry that is very tough. And we're a group of friends who are all very different. So the likelihood that we'd all be doing the same thing is incredibly slim. But at the same time, I think behind the facade of us saying, oh, we'll all be in the same show together, I'll be in the front row, I think there is a genuine support for one another to do well, whatever that means, whether that's touring theatre, whether that's being in the West End, whether that's creating something new, or pursuing something else different, like completely differently, if you finish your training and find a passion elsewhere.
Definitely. And my final question for you today is, what are your final like thoughts and feelings on the treatment of the industries during this time and the underfunding that continues to go on in schools when it comes to creative subjects?
The schools has always been a passion of mine. I've been so fortunate that actually over the years my primary school have invited me back to sing and to like sing at their Christmas and summer fairs and to sing for music afternoons and creative sessions. And I've always loved that, because they're only a small school. They don't have the facility to put on lots of music and drama and offer that, but they still have a push. And I love to go back and and remember the big kids that I used to watch singing, and I love that. And I think it was really sad that actually in our town, because we weren't from a very big town, there wasn't a huge range of opportunity within school. So I mean, hopefully we'll move into a direction where we can kind of appreciate all industries for what they, because I've always thought it doesn't matter how much there is a financial implication of how much money does it bring to a country, but also I think we don't necessarily nourish the economy, but we nourish the soul, and I think that's just as important.
Definitely. I think it's a shame that a lot of schools have had to cut art lessons and music lessons because they haven't got the money to sort of fund the equipment. And I think hopefully people will put their foot down and go, no, this is important.
Yeah, hopefully. I think we are reaching a turning point where it will kind of go one way or the other. But I think one thing that you can never ignore is the passion that we have in our creative industries, much more so than you see in a lot of other industries. So I think hopefully our passion and our determination to refuse to bow down to those things will result in a positive change.
Definitely. Well, thank you for answering my questions.
Well, thank you for having me.